Hello. Welcome to Bold Influence with Lena. I am so glad that you can join us. I hope I can get to see everybody joining us from our audience from YouTube, obviously Facebook. Alfreda, whatever you are, please share this with your groups. I think I shared it with most of my groups that I needed to share with. I am excited. I thank God for this opportunity. Looking forward to chatting with my bold and fearless sister. So, if I can just get started, thank you for all 10 of you that have come on. I hope I get to see you. Please comment where you're watching from so I can see you. It's very important that I give a shout out to my audience. So, as we get started, let me see if I can see everybody that is coming on here. Oh wow, yeah, the crowd is building up. I see all 20 of you. Unfortunately, with the desktop, I can't shout out to each person, but I'm gonna hope that you can comment and share where you are watching from. Oh, my brother Roderick from California in the house. Yes, let's see where everybody's coming in. So I just want to start by saying that it's a great opportunity, privilege, and honor to be here today, to be alive and well. And also, 2 days ago, I am saddened, like most of you, when we learned that the king of Wakanda forever, the king of Wakanda, Chala, lost his battle to colon cancer. It's very important for men at the age of 40 to go for their testing. That's when they do the screening for colon cancer. But I would say that there is great disparities among Black people. I think it's like 24% of the people that are noted with colon cancer here in the US happen to be African American males. And unfortunately, 47% of the fatalities are African American. So do get screened. Even though King Chala's diagnosis wouldn't have been caught at age 40 because he was diagnosed at 38, at least do the least you can to get checked and screened, because there are resources out there. It's supposed to be one of the safest and least fatal cancers, but as you can see, it killed our hope when we were hurting the most, when it was a sign of hope and representation, especially for the Black people and Black children, like my children. When we watched Black Panther, it was important for them to see a superhero in their time. Thank you, Makori Okeo from Bloomington, Minnesota, Luz Muihaki from Oklahoma, Marilyn Klug from St. Louis Park, Minnesota, Lori from Brooklyn Center, Gaki from Arizona. Awesome. We are filling the house. So I want to say, in a time like now, when we are dealing with a global pandemic and a global uprising with everything going on in our community, from police brutality to systemic racism to all people fighting justice for equality for all people, I think it's great times that we have conversations that can lead us somewhere, that can bring change, that can bring knowledge, that can create those spaces of relationships so that we can grow to the right direction. Having said that, I am always intrigued by the civil rights activists. And I've always wondered what challenges they faced, and going through that, what they felt, really is what I meant to say. Going through what they went through, what they felt, and seeing what's happening in our communities now. It's relatable, but I can't even imagine. But I am grateful for all those who fought. So I am able to sit here and chat with you and share the list that I know that we can share. Today, I am excited to interview the one and only, bold and fearless, Miss Alfreda Princess. Alfreda is a community organizer with the Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation. She lives in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. She was born in Liberia, so she was in that war-torn country at the time and happened to flee to Ghana as a refugee and eventually migrated to the United States. Alfreda attended St. Cloud State University, where she studied political science and international relations and human resources. So she's here to tell us about human relations in all of that. Please join me as I get excited to welcome my one and only sister. Alfreda, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So I'm excited to have you here. And of course, you're on this pedestal because you chose to put yourself in the line of service. So just to say to the people that may not know you, you and I are friends, you and I are sisters, you and I are African immigrants in our community. Who is Alfreda for the people who may not know you?
Yeah. So beyond the politics, um, I am Alfreda Daniels. I am originally from Liberia, where I was born. My father uh, was a medical doctor who, I'm sorry, I'm hearing an
I
echo.
think there's echo there.
Yes.
Can
Is
you
it
hear
better?
me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, there was an echo. I don't know if it's my phone or yours, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think you fixed something. Oh no, I'm still hearing you.
Okay.
Okay, but it's good, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so my father was a medical doctor, studied abroad here in the US, and then went back home and married my mother. Um, I have 7 brothers, and I'm the only girl, and I'm the youngest. And so, okay, so I was born in Liberia, so that's the family dynamics. And then in the heat of the war, that's when I was born. If anyone is familiar with the heat of the Liberia war, I was born in 1991, so I'm a war baby. I can kind of still hear myself.
I'm hearing an echo, so I'm
Yeah.
trying to see if it's. Do you have headphones that you can put on?
Oh, sure. Let
I
me grab
think
that.
mine are upstairs, so it's not gonna do us too much good
Okay,
here.
let me grab a headphone.
Okay. So while Alfreda grabs some headphones, for that echo, I am sorry for that brief interruption. I will give a shout out to my sister Liz Mungai from Alabama, Alabama in the house, Risper from Dallas, Lucy Muihaki. There's an echo. Okay, so she's going to grab some headphones. Um, that should be clear. Hopefully you can comment and say if you can hear me because I don't hear the echo now, but maybe when she gets the headphones, we should be good. Having said that, you can hear that Miss Alfreda was a refugee, grew up in Liberia, born and raised there, eventually went to Ghana. That's what she was trying to say. Let's hope that her headphones are going to quiet things down a bit so you guys can hear. Everybody's saying they can't hear, they can't hear.
Okay, is this better?
Much better. Like
Okay,
totally clear. Now you
great.
can say what you are saying because I was trying to repeat. Awesome.
Okay,
Yes. Now
okay,
we can
great.
hear. Yes.
All right. So, like I was saying, I am originally from Liberia. I was born to a very strong and fierce woman, Elizabeth Wetchen. May her soul rest in peace. And my father was a medical doctor who went to school here in the US and then went back home and fell in love with my mother. And I'm a product of that. I have 7 brothers, and I'm the only girl.
Ooh.
Yes, um, I wasn't necessarily a princess, but I ended up growing up as a tomboy. But I love my family. My father unfortunately lost his life during the war. As you know, in the heat of the war, doctors was needed because a lot of people was wounded, and he left the home. According to my mom, she tried to stop him, but he needed to go and save some people who needed his help, and that's how he was killed. Um,
How old were
but
you then?
my mom was still pregnant for me. She was 8 months pregnant for me when my father died. Um,
I'm sorry to
so
learn that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, so that is my family dynamic. Um, so I was born in the war. I was born in 1991. So I'm a war baby. So I was one of those kids that would go to school and then for like few months, and then we would have to stop going to school because of the war, and it was coming to Monrovia. So we were used to the whole straight bullets. We knew how to shower properly without getting hit with straight bullets.
Wow.
So those were tough times, but I was born into it, so I didn't know any different. Um, anyway, fast forward, the war actually got so tough and heated, and at this time I was 8 years old, and my mom decided it was time for me to leave the country. Didn't know anyone anywhere, but because I was the youngest and it was easier for my brothers to care for themselves and to care for her than me, she decided to put me on a bus that was leaving to Cote d'Ivoire. And so I got on that bus and I found myself in Cote d'Ivoire with a neighbor of ours who I stayed with. And then after a few months, we went to Ghana, and we settled on the Budubram refugee camp.
Wow.
And I lived there for 6 years.
Wow. So
Yes,
how old were you when you got on the bus?
8 years old.
Wow.
A little bit shy of 8,
Oh
so
my
about 7.
God.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so we got to Ghana, and we stayed there for a while. Living in a refugee camp was an eye opener. The government didn't know your name; they just knew your number. So we had a number assigned to us, and the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, were the one bringing food and supplies for us on the camp. And they were also resettling refugees. So they had this program where the computer is just going to randomly choose your number, and then they're going to randomly choose of all the countries that were accepting Liberian refugees, which country you're going to go to. So our numbers was chosen, and we were interviewed, and we were brought to the U.S.
Was your mom there then?
No. So this whole time it was me and the neighbor I was living with. And I wanted to make this clear. Like, the refugee camp wasn't a vacation. I can talk about it now, but part of where I developed this resilience was traveling alone and living on a refugee camp in an unknown place, living with a person who was abusing alcohol, and that left me exposed to physical, mental, and sexual abuse.
Mm.
Um, and that was something that I suffered for years on the camp. And in our community, we know, like, even back home right now, just this year, there have been more than 900 reported rape cases that involved young kids around the age I was at the time and even below. And but it's not something that we talked about. It's not something that we can talk about. So that was something that I had to suffer in silence, until we left the camp. So that's where I built my resilience, because for the longest time I had to be silent about what was happening to me at home, but it gave me so much strength to advocate for other people. So while on the refugee camp, I realized I was an organizer because it was a plant, where we had the opportunity as students of senior high schools on the camp to write a paper that was going to be reviewed by the UN about projects that need to happen on the camp. And my paper, or my project, was about employment. So a lot of refugees could not, actually, no refugee could work outside of the camp. And there were no jobs on the camp.
Were you
However,
going to
there were.
school?
I went to school on the camp. Yes, we had schools on the camp. We had churches. We built a community on the camp.
Wow.
Yes, we did. So I wrote a paper, and it was basically a suggestion on how to provide jobs for refugees in the camp. Well, the United Nations were bringing food supplies, and usually it was Ghanaians that had to distribute those foods, and they were being paid for doing that. So my suggestion was, why don't you let refugees
Refugees do it.
distribute
Mhm.
food to refugees?
Mm.
So my paper was chosen, and then that changed some things on the camp, and I loved how it made me feel. But that wasn't something that I came out with by myself. I went around door to door and asked, people, is like, if you would have had a job, like, what would it be? Like, would you like to be one of those people distributing food? How is that going to change your life? So that was my research, because we didn't have computer.
Wow.
So, and I wrote that paper, and and things were changed on the camp.
How
And I
old
think
were you when you wrote that paper?
I was around 10, 11.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was chosen, and that made me feel really good. And that actually gave people opportunity to get jobs on the camp and become employed through the avenue. Go
That
ahead.
is so. I'm glad I asked you who Alfreda is because I have learned so much about you than all the years I've known you, just in a few minutes. And
Yeah.
I want to say that sometimes we take our privilege for granted because I feel listening to you, I feel very privileged.
Mm,
Coming as an African immigrant to the US from Kenya that had never experienced war, that I came here because my parents could send me for further studies, not because I was forced, but because I
mm,
volunteered or they volunteered for me to come. I think there's such a big disconnect or a lot of learning to be done amongst us to see our journeys and our stories to find a cross section on where we intertwine. Was when you and I are running the streets of our communities trying to educate and empower our people, we forget how the humble beginnings that go behind that. And that's what I've learned from you.
so
Just
true.
listening to you. And even it's shocking to hear 8-year old, my daughter's 10, 8-year old getting on a bus to a strange land, and the trust that your mother must have had, like, she's got to get better opportunities, at least she's got to live no matter what she
Mhm.
goes through. I want her to live. I think
Yes.
that's the resilience and the sacrifices of many
Yeah.
black people, I would say, anywhere in the
Mhm.
world. It's like
Mhm.
whatever I gotta do just so they can have a life.
That
So
is so
having said that, I feel like we need to do this again for the children and for domestic violence and for
true. Yeah.
sexual abuse and just the
Mhm.
journey of your path. You could write a book that I
Mhm.
would love to read. Having so I have learned so much. So I want to say
Mhm.
this. Then you learned about community organizing, reaching out to the fellow refugees to ask, what's your agenda?
Mhm.
What does that look like? And then you took that agenda and put it in a paper and it passed. And I
Mhm.
think that's what you're trying to do in this journey. And now it's making sense to me why you would risk to be a city council member of a city in Minnesota. Because this didn't just start now. We can see how things build us. So a lot of
Mhm.
people may not know about that path, and I'm glad you shared it. But I am sure you've been influenced by our civil rights leaders here in the US, but also your resilience of going through war back home and surviving and being here to say, I have done it. So, what challenges, having overcome so much already to be alive, first of all, life is good. Education is another one, and being able to have this opportunity to serve as a leader of our community. Those are all kind of celebratory overcomings that you've gone through, that you've had. Now, let me move on to say, as a public health nurse in 2018, the American Public Association declared law enforcement a violence a public health issue. You and I live in Minneapolis, where we saw what happened in May to George Floyd in the hands of a Minneapolis police officer. You and I have been following the news to see what happened to Breonna Taylor in Kentucky while she's sleeping. Prior to that, we heard about the guy, Ahmad Amri from Georgia, who was shot while jogging. Let me bring it back to Jacob Blake in Wisconsin, what we are currently dealing with, where he was shot 7 times by a police officer. A lot of people may not know this, but Alfreda was actually raised by a godfather here in the US who happened to be a police officer. So
Mm-hmm.
while she's speaking from both sides of experience, being having a parent who's a cop and having cops kill people. So I like to say that being against police brutality does not make you anti-police, or being being pro-police. You can also be against police brutality. What's your take on that?
So first of all, I just wanted to say that I love Todd. He's like a family to me.
Okay, who's Todd?
Um,
You want to tell
Todd
people
is a
who Todd
police
is?
officer who helped raise me here in the U.S. in Big Lake. He's actually it's still a Big Lake police officer. Wonderful man, and he is not great just because he's a police officer, but he is just a wonderful person.
Okay.
But having Todd as someone who is part of my family and also happens to deal with police brutality and what police represent within the Black community. This is not a police versus the Black community. This is about right and wrong. And I think that's where we need to speak to. Me saying that what the police represents a Black community is completely wrong doesn't mean that I hate Todd. It means that the institution of which he works for needs to do a better job of accountability. You cannot leave such job up to a person's character. When we talk about good police officers and bad police officers, they are not good and bad because there are laws that make them that way. It's because that's who they are before they became a police officer. So if a bad person with prejudice and racist lens join the police force, they have the power, more power to enforce that belief. And it shows in their work. What the institution of police does not have right now is an accountability piece. So whether or not you have your biases before you join the police force, if you had that accountability piece, most people probably wouldn't even join. So I think we are being completely unfair to judge this as good or bad police officers. There's just certain positions that certain people are in that you don't have a choice to be good or bad. For example, you cannot be a pilot and then to say, oh, go ahead and enjoy your ride. But just so you know, sometimes we have good pilots and we have bad pilots. You might crash with some of them and some of them you might not, but you'll be fine. There's just certain professions that is not an option. And your trainings and the laws in place have to position you to do what's right. And I think that's what we're missing with the police force. We cannot leave it up to people, personal character, for them to be able to make a better decision in dealing with people who the institution who doesn't even respect or see as human. So it's up to them to say, no, I see them as human. I'm going to treat them that way, even though the law say I don't have to. So I hope people understand that. That is what the police represents a Black community. And I agree, we have good people and we have bad people. But the institution of police have a lot of work that needs to be done. Also, besides the accountability, let's be fair. I think we are putting too much on the shoulders of our police officers. When a cat is stuck in a tree, we call the police. When someone is having a bad day, we call the police. Now, when a crime is being committed, we call the police as well. People need to realize that the police job is to fight crime. And fighting crime doesn't alone by itself ensure safety. Safety have a lot to do with, like, do you have a good house? Are you mentally stable? Do you have good food to eat? All of that combined with low crime is safety. But the police part in that pie is the fight crime. So if you're calling the police because I'm having a bad day, they're going to criminalize me because that's their job. They're going to arrest me because I'm yelling, maybe, I'm disturbing a neighbor. They're not trained to assess the situation and say, this is what she needs to be safe. So having the police to fight crime and having other people who understand the different dynamics of safety, I think it's a good balance. It's going to remove a lot of issues off the plate of our police officers, and they can focus on fighting crime. While if you see a homeless person, if that person is no threat to you, why are you calling the police? You can call someone who can come and make sure that person have a safe place to sleep and good food to eat. Or if today or tomorrow and I'm having mental issues or mental breakdown, call someone who can help me, especially if I'm not committing a crime. So I believe that's where the disconnect is. And I think because of how sometimes we word this, most police officers would become defensive. But in other times, for me at least, the way I see it is taking a lot of things off our police officers' plate. They're being trained. Go ahead.
So we've heard terms thrown around, and I appreciate you sharing that because you've thought through it, you've hanged out with them, and you've reached out. But have you heard about, like, you saw me post about abolishing, at the time there was a lot of heat with George Floyd, so people were very emotional. I don't think they understood that term abolishing, because we do need police. However, defunding is what I'm hearing from what you're saying about kind of spreading the chores of the police and what's determining what's for the police and what's for the community. But I also hear you talk about community accountability, where communities should be able to take care of each other instead of calling the police to arrest me if I'm doing something, if it's safe. Now, what is really okay? So then we hear about reform. I think reform is the latest that we are hearing a lot. So when I hear accountability and I hear your message about we are expecting a lot from our cops, that's what you said, we are putting a lot on their plate. Can you clarify that, of like, what are your thoughts? And obviously you're in the community, what do you think is the best solution? Then we can move on to the next step.
So I think for me, the way I understand, I'm not no police. Maybe because I haven't had the time to really think through that, but I do believe we need police. Even though I still agree that the institution of police represents something completely negative to the Black community.
Yeah.
But with the proper laws and policies in place, I think that could be changed. Because at the end of the day, we're still going to have crimes, right? There's always going to be bad people. However, I do agree with the theory around defunding the police, even though the term doesn't do it justice, right? What I believe defunding the police is actually divesting the funds that go into police, into policing, into other programs. Maybe that can be under the police, but you don't have to go to a training to learn how to shoot to kill to be a community service police officer. See what I'm saying? Or maybe the criteria for you to work and become this kind of police officer is that you have to have a degree in mental health services or something like that. So you're going to be trained to know how to protect yourself and other people, but your primary responsibility is to respond to mental health issues. Or someone who have worked with homeless people before, and you are joining the police force, and your job is not to respond to crime. So if someone call 911 and say, hey, there's someone breaking into my house, you are not going to be the one to show up to that. A person who is trained to respond to something like that will. But if someone calls and says there's a homeless person, you can show up. However, if that homeless person becomes violent, you also have the training to respond and keep yourself and the community safe. So that's the way I see it.
I agree. I mean, and that's your way, and I respect that. But I think as an educator, I must mention that the policing in America, if you look at the origin, it was founded by white Americans to monitor the slaves, the African slaves, so they don't get away, so they don't run. And in the southern states, we heard about hunting the Negroes and things like that. So I think from that background, it's very important for the community and the public to know that the origin of this institution was founded by white people to hunt the black slave, the African slave. So on that context, that is where the healing or the foundation has to be looked at. And then when you talk about education, which is a big piece of what you mentioned, I hear you mention about the training. Yes, I feel like the high school training is not enough considering the amount of work and critical thinking and critical people skills that goes into police education. I think they need more. They need more, like even just a 2-year degree. They need more. It just can't be high school and then you're ready to serve. And then I think, like you said, we can't hold people character to govern, to apply laws, because if you're raised by a racist, you're going to apply that. If you're raised in a good home, you're going to do that. So anyway, moving on to what we are going to talk about next. Thank you for that, Ms. Alfreda. According to the American Immigration Council, in 2018, nearly 10% of Minnesota residents are immigrants. 10%, that's a big number. And that is about 480, almost 500,000 are immigrants here, just here, foreign-born U.S. population here in Minnesota. You and I happen to be in those numbers. We are the 1 and 2. So, and then you, as an African immigrant, I would say that I think we hear a lot about, you know, Hispanics and the 11 million undocumented people, but there's a missing link or a missing piece. What is your take on that?
So I am also, besides being a candidate for Brooklyn Center City Council and an organizer with the Minneapolis Region of Labor Federation, I'm also one of the co-founders of an organization called Black Immigrant Collective. That organization was created intentionally to work with and amplify the stories and voices of Black immigrants. And to your question, I believe um, in working with other people towards towards immigrant justice, the piece that has been missing is the Black immigrant story. And I remember when we used to do this work before came about, we used to be there like shouting like, us too. Black people are undocumented. Look, we have TPS too. There are Black people on DACA as well. But the stories, and this is not necessarily good or bad, it can be argued either way, was focused primarily on our Latinx family. Which means they were targeted more, but actually Black immigrants were also targeted. We all know that if you're Black in America, your chances of getting pulled over is higher than most. And when that happens and you are undocumented and the police pull you over and say, "Can I have your driver license?" "No, I don't." You know what happened next. But those things were happening and those stories weren't being told. So myself and other fierce young Black immigrant women decided it's time for us to come together and create an organization that's going to help amplify and advocate for and with our Black immigrants here in Minnesota and in America as a whole. So that's the piece I thought was missing.
And that's great to know, because I think in Minnesota, I guess I should say, I think you were part of the team that fought for the Liberian DED here in the cities.
Correct.
And do you want to mention anything about that?
Yes. So through the work that we have been doing to again amplify the voices of Black immigrants and immigrant stories, we have had a lot of cases of people from Liberia, Haiti, and other places. So about a couple of years ago, we were working on the HR 6 bill. That is the bill that's going to grant pathway to citizenship for everyone. This is a bill that we were working with together with our Hispanic and Latinx and our Asian family. So it was going to create pathway to citizenship for all immigrants. That did not pass the Senate. It passed the House, but it didn't pass the Senate. But in the process, we eventually, earlier this year, a bill came about, the defense bill that you all heard about. It was very traumatic. But there was a little language in the defense bill that mentioned the Liberian Refugee Fairness Act. This actually is not new. This was something that people like Keith Ellison and them introduced way like in the 90s to help create pathways to citizenship for Liberians. But that was mentioned in the defense bill, and that was something that um, the president ended up signing. I'm gonna be honest with this. Us at Black Immigrant Collective, we do not or did not like the defense bill. If you notice, a lot of people pointed out that Ilhan Omar did not vote for this bill. We did not want her to vote for this bill. Because what this bill does, even though it gives Liberians pathway to citizenship, it's actually very dangerous for every other Black immigrant and other immigrants. And we felt like we were selling others to get something, right? So basically, right now, our Black immigrants at the borders are going through a lot more worse because of that defense bill. Even though our Liberian immigrant community got pathway to citizenship, which is good. But what we wanted was the HR 6 bill,
Right.
which was actually going to give pathway to citizenship for everyone.
Everybody.
And understand that Liberian bill did not give pathway to citizenship for like Black immigrants or just Liberians. So we thought that was a divide and conquer strategy. Well, the bill was passed, and our Liberian community got pathway to citizenship. As an organizer, I learned to celebrate my small victories. I felt like that was a small victory that deserved celebration. But at the same time, we continue to educate people to fight and push and make sure you vote right, because we still have the HR 6, bill, and we still have a lot of work to do.
Amen. I like that. So we still gotta work and we still gotta fight, and I think that is where you come in. And you and I were chatting about Chadwick Boseman dying and using his platform as an amazing Black, gifted, talented actor to bring representation in Hollywood, and he did that. We were proud of him. We celebrate him, and may his family be comforted at this hard time. I know that you are very passionate about representation in the schools. You're very passionate about representation to advocate for our children, our teachers, our parents, our community. What is your take on that? I think that's really what I should ask you, because I want you to share what your thoughts are, what you know and what you've seen.
So, besides all the other titles, I also facilitate a table called the Local Representation for Osceola School District. And what we are fighting for is representation at the board level in Osceola School District. Currently, Osceola School District is the 5th largest school district in Minnesota. It covers Brooklyn Park, part of Brooklyn Center, Maple Grove, part of Plymouth, Dayton, Osceola, and Carhon, I think. It's a pretty big district. However, in the past, we've had issues where, actually, let me state the stats. We have 51% students of color. A majority of those kids of color comes from Brooklyn Park and a little bit of Brooklyn Center.
Immigrant children.
Most of them are immigrant children. And when I say kids of color, it's not just Black. We're talking about Hmong, Asian, Latinx, right? So in the past, all of our board members have come from Maple Grove. This is not a mistake, though. Even though we have more voters in Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center area, majority of those voters are not educated on the civic engagement and responsibility enough to vote for school board. Most of them didn't know that. So because of that, majority of the votes come from Maple Grove. And because all of the board members are elected at large, A board member can choose to just run a campaign in Maple Grove and not Brooklyn Park and win. And still people from Brooklyn Park will vote for them because most people, either if the vote is just by name recognition or just go on there and choose whatever. And they didn't know anything about the candidate. And what happens when that happened is that the people who are representing our kids or making policies for our kids have no idea the struggles of the kids on the other side because they didn't campaign in that area, right? And they have no lived experience either. So this happened for years, and as a result of that, we had majority of our Black kids were being suspended at a very high rate on a regular basis. The achievement gap was expanding every day. We have no diversity as far as staff and teachers, right? We had racism happening within the schools, and the very few Black teachers or teachers of color that we had to quit because they had to face this type of behavior every day. And our board wasn't equipped or willing to push or create policies that are going to stop those behaviors. So we created that table, and that table have like community organization, parents, and teachers. And they said, listen, we want to change how we elect our board members. Instead of all of the board members being elected at large and giving them the opportunity to campaign in one city over the other, let's have a ward system where we have districts. In a way, if your district cover a little bit of Osseo and a little bit of Brooklyn Park, you will have to campaign in that area to get your vote. And in campaigning, as a candidate now, one thing I've learned is in campaigning, you get to hear directly from people and their issues. And that is the issues that you are expected to represent on the board. And if you don't, you're not going to get elected the next time.
Right.
So now you have the people holding you directly accountable.
I like that.
So that was why we created the local representation. And it's very important when it comes to education because we're talking about our kids. This is the place they get their education, their social skills to move up in life. Imagine having a child who goes through the educational system without having a single Black teacher. That child is less likely to become a teacher themselves because all the teachers they've seen are white and they're not white. So I guess Black people can be teachers. Those are the lessons that we are teaching our kids. And they're consistently seeing that things, kids, they know what's happening. They're seeing that things are not right. They're having their friends be mean towards them because of the color of their skin, the way they talk. And they don't see, whenever they go to the principal office, there is nothing concrete that's happening. So they know there are no policies in place to protect them. We cannot continue to have our kids go through systems like this. At the end of the day, we're creating the prison, the school to prison pipeline.
That's it.
For our kids.
Yeah, and I love how you say that because I think you and I were probably at this forum where we were talking about the psychological effects of like refugee being a war-torn, being a product of war child, if I can use that term. And when you come here and you kind of have to play with the lights or teachers who actually get it, who understand the cultural aspect of things. And I think you mentioned something that is very important as well. As parents, you know what I do. Most of us in healthcare, we live on our doubles. Okay? So all we know to do is work hard to provide for our families, and you can't penalize us on that. But I think you bring an aspect that is very important. How do we stay engaged so we are not missing in advocating for our children? How do we stay engaged? And I think that's what I'm hearing you say, that it's very important to be at those tables or to support people like you who are going to be the representative who get it. So I want to say, as again, I love the fact that we are learning and we are growing, and I commend you for doing what you do. So we're in a time where we may not be those civil rights leaders who are here, but they created a pathway for us to do things our way, we in our space that we are in right now. And if you think back of simple examples, as a healthcare person, I love to use like the book, I think it's Henrietta Lacks, the black tobacco farmer who was dealing with cervical cancer, and the doctor snuck her cancer cells and rushed them down the hall without her consent and used them to study, and they were hoping they would grow them on a petri dish and die, but she refused to die. That's why she's known as the immortal saleswoman. Or thinking about the 11 African women slaves who were practiced on surgery without anesthesia, even though anesthesia was available. The disparities that exist in the system, I could go on forever with the Tuskegee experiment of the black men with syphilis, despite the fact that penicillin was available. And we see this, and I think it may seem extreme when we look at it and it's hurtful that way, but it's no different when your child is punished for taking Skittles from Alfreda when it's not a big deal, but then it goes on their record as theft, and they could end up in juvenile just because nobody's there to advocate for them, because the system is flawed that way. Now, all your experiences, all your struggles, all your service, all your community service growth has kind of staged you for your purpose now, if I can use that word. What is your, why are you running for city council? And if I can just say, as an African immigrant woman who has no one to look up to for city council, role model, who has no one, and I shared this I think with Representative Omar Elam when I was talking to her, like, you guys are kind of going at it like baptism by fire. You don't have a manual, you don't have a model, you don't have nothing to follow. You're just kind of navigating, creating your own path. How does that feel, and what's your take on that, being the one creating the path?
Yes. Oh, that's heavy. That have a lot of unpacking. But before I even answer that question,
I want to thank the civil rights, like I said, who fought to get you the opportunity to do what you're about to do.
Yes. Before I answer that question, actually, I wanted to say that I recognize and I understand that racism is institutional, and that the police institution is not the only institution that you find racism. And it's in our healthcare, our school system, and everywhere else. I just want to say that. And also, I wanted to recognize our ancestors who have created this path for us. They did not leave the society how they met it. Because of them, I'm able to purchase my first home today. Because of them, I'm able to get a good education, even though it's not perfect. And I also vow not to leave the society as I met it, because that will be doing injustice to the generation after us. Okay, so to your question, why am I running? I have organized in this area for 12 years.
Wow.
And as a community organizer, I see a lot of great leaders. I have seen a lot of great leaders on the city council in Brooklyn Center. And I understand that they're doing the absolute best. But I also found out there was something lacking. And what that was a way to come to a people-centered governance. A lot of our elected officials are not well versed in organizing or intentionally reaching out to our community to make sure their voice is part of the decision that we make. This is something that I do on a daily basis. And I am running because I want to be able to bring our community together. I want to be able to show that when we make decisions based on what the people we represent need, rather than what we think is best, our city or any institution for that matter, we're actually going to grow. And there's going to be unity within our community. And also, it's important too for people to feel a part of the city where they live. That is one of the main reasons why I decided that I wanted to run and bring that mindset to the city and to City Hall, for people to understand City Hall is theirs, and whatever decision we make have to be people-centered, but also to show how we can do it. So how are we engaging our community members who are immigrants who don't speak English, who have hearing impairment, what are some things that we need to put in place to make them feel welcome and to ask them and say, we need your voice, is important to us. As part of the reason why I'm running, amongst others. But I really want to touch on the question you asked, because I'm like here, like, yes, yes, I want to answer that. So what the struggles, and I'm happy to come to talk about some of the issues I'm running on, which is like community engagement, housing. I believe housing is another measure of towards safety. Where you live determines where your kids go to school, where you work, and where you can work. And then safety, as far as how do we redefine safety, right, in a community and have a community-based safety plan. So, to the other question that I'm so eager to answer, running as I am have been the most challenging thing ever.
Wow. Ever? Like a refugee girl?
Ever. Because even as a refugee girl, I was never forced to defend my existence.
Wow.
Even as a survivor of sexual assault, I was never forced to redefine and explain and defend my existence before telling my story. That's why I say it's the most difficult thing that I've ever had to go through. One, as a woman, this system doesn't favor women as a whole. And this is not just going into Black or immigrants. The system as it is, as women, we're still being seen as people who have a place, and that place is not politics. That's one. Two, you add the skin tone to it. This beautiful dark skin tone comes with a lot of blessings and curse. I am judged before I even open my mouth to speak.
And then when you open,
I'm still judged. Mm-hmm. So people hear me based on my skin tone before they even hear my voice. So I can write something as harmless, which I have, and say, I will not be complicit to hate. Nobody have issue with anyone saying I'm not going to be complicit to hate. Do you?
No.
Exactly. But then put my picture behind those words. It's from a Black woman. She's angry. She's loud. She's rude.
We are not
now,
racist.
Thank you. Now, I'm no longer talking about why I won't be complicit to hate. I'm now defending my existence before we come to the issue. On top of that, add the fact that I'm African. I'm an African woman from West Africa, Liberia, who in the history of that country have had one female president recently, and where gender inequality is very normal. Women get raped, they get beat up, they get abused, assaulted, and nothing happens. And that behavior has transitioned even here into the US. What a lot of people don't understand is that in our little communities, we have our struggles, and that is one of the struggles. In my community, I'm not allowed to be loud. I'm not allowed to speak truth. I'm not allowed to run, especially not against a man. Not when other men are available to run. So I have that from my community upon everything else. So I find myself continuously defending my existence. But let me tell you what keeps me going. It's when I see a young Black African girl who says, "What? You are running? for office,
Mhm.
that brings so much joy to me
Yeah.
because I am telling that girl that you can be whoever you want to be just as you are.
Mhm.
And whenever people tell me tune it down and I say no, I am also telling another black woman that you can be black, you can be strong, you can be firm, and you can still run.
Mhm.
You can be you and run as you are. And that's what keeps me going.
Wow.
You don't have to go to political science classes to learn how to talk politics. Usually, when that happens, people are telling you this is how you should be to make me feel comfortable to accept you.
Mhm.
But what people don't realize is the problem is with them, not you, not me. If you're uncomfortable accepting me as I am, and once you see me, it's no longer about what I'm saying, but who's saying it, I think you are the problem. I'm not.
I love how you say that because I think it's powerful what you're saying because number one, you're giving a lot of people permission to use their voice.
Mhm.
You're giving
Yeah.
voice to the young ones, you're giving voice to the women like you and I and other ones who may feel like, ooh, I just gotta whisper or I can't speak up. Or
Yeah.
maybe I'm not supposed to say anything. I think that's powerful, and also the inspiration of the to the young people. Like you can be anything, a boy, a girl, you can run. If your heart is in it, you can serve. And I think Florence says it's so unfortunate that we should defend ourselves as women when we want to contribute and be relevant to society. And I think it's very painful and powerful at the same time
Mhm.
what you just shared, that the fact that it's almost like you are okay as an organizer, you are okay running errands in the community, but the moment you said, I'm going to lead,
Mm.
I'm gonna be the representative. I'm gonna be the leader that sits at the table and makes those decisions. Then there was a problem. So what we've learned is, I think, from the great Maya Angelou, who said that most people will be comfortable with you in those other professions or positions, like a janitor and housekeeper and everything, but they're
Mhm.
not comfortable with you as the leader or the doctor or the professional. So I
Mhm.
think you're breaking those barriers, and I love you for it. So I want to say
Mhm.
congratulations, first of all, for
Thank
making it
you.
through the primary. For those who
Thank you.
voted for her, I'm sure she is grateful. And as we come to a close of these, I'll have you think of your leadership nugget or your last advice. You already kind of said something to the young people, but as you think through that, if people want to support you, can you say what you're doing, what city, how they can get a hold of you, and what support
Yes.
you need?
Yes, definitely. So I am running for Brooklyn Center City Council. You can reach me by visiting my website at www.alfredadaniels.org. We have all the information there. Or you can shoot me an email at info@alfredadaniels.org.
Okay. And
We
maybe you can
need,
share a link on when you post later so
yes,
people
yes,
can
I
get a
can
hold
do
of you.
that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Awesome.
And we do need a lot of help. Campaign need money. People want to donate.
Your voice, I think it's kind of muting a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Please visit our website to donate to our campaign. Also, we need volunteers. Please go ahead and volunteer your time, even if it's a shift or if you can pick up a phone to call for us. You don't literally have to live in Minnesota to make calls for us. It's a link. We can send that to you. Or even if you live in the city, if you want a yard sign, please reach out to us. Our campaign Facebook page is Alfreda Daniels for Brooklyn Center City Council. Reach out to us. Or if you just want to meet and have a conversation, we are happy to also have that conversation with you.
That's
And
amazing.
Lena, thank you so much for providing this platform, for me to be able to share a little bit about myself. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people from Brooklyn Center who are watching, like, yeah, I want to hear more. You will. I will be at your doors. We can talk, and you can get to know me beyond the politics and get to know who's asking for your support.
And I love that. I love how you're ending that. There's a lot of people already saying they're gonna pray for you and wish you the best. And obviously, thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking the risk, daring to do what you are doing. We see you. We obviously pray for you to send you all the vibes of strength and the vibes of courage and parents, they staged as well, they sacrificed, and we want to do the best to make them proud as well. And for those who love, I think she said something about the power of sometimes it's misery to feel like you have to defend your existence. But that's not new. You can imagine what the civil rights leaders or the people who were there before had to go through. You can imagine what Alfreda's mom had to go through sending her away as a young baby to another country to give her the best. I think you have a lot of resilience, a lot of wisdom to give people. And I think if I can use the words of I think it was a Spanish or is it a Greek guy? The guy, he was fighting because the Greek alienated him for being gay, and I think they were really mean to him. And his name is Dinos Christianopolis. And I remember he said something about they tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds.
Yes.
I think that's what happened to you. You've gone through so much and you're suddenly blooming and you're here to be the plant you were created to be. So bloom away, girlfriend, and may God bless you. And thank you all our viewers, Lucy, Florence, Rispa, everybody who's been tuning in. I am sorry I can't see every person here. Let me see if I can see some people watching. Mary Angela, Pauline Wanjiru, Gaki, Priscilla, Lori from Brooklyn Park, Lillian, all of you. I may not say your name, please forgive me, but we appreciate you. Your time is a gift to all of us. Again, Miss Princess, let's do this again. I wish you the best. If you need me, you know where to find me.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
And
very
thanks to
welcome.
all of our viewers.
Yes,
Have
to
a
all
good
of our
night.
viewers as well. Have a good night.